so now it's time to render. And this is going to work very similarly to how we rendered the project one. Again, under Arnold, we have our, open our render view. What I would like to do before I spend hours rendering is go through and periodically check a few spots. Like, for example, I notice my ship flies away back here. I just want to make sure it's visible back there, right? And in my case, it may not be. I may need to add a little bit of additional lighting on just the ship as it goes by out through here. Okay? So, if you just sort of click through, check a few spots periodically, from the camera angle you're going to render from. Right? I know it's not where we're rendering from there. We're rendering from like here. Right? Got to fix my horn. I'm still going to put a couple more things in my scene as well. So there's just things I can click through here and maybe catch some of the errors before they happen. Right? And once I've done that though, it's time to go ahead and just render out the entire sequence. So most of that information is going to be under our render settings. And I'm going to show you Arnold first, and then I'll show you Redshift, even though this is not set up to render Redshift right now. The first thing you're going to notice is like your frame numbers are blocked out here. I'm going to just go ahead and change this to name_number.extension. And then I can set the frame range I want to render. And so I will call this shot 1, but I'm going to spell out 1 with O-N-E. And then it's going to be underscore. It's going to be shot 1 underscore number extension. Now, the reason I'm not naming it shot 1 is because it would add to the number here. It would be shot 1 underscore 001, right? And so I'm going to try to keep this letters if possible. And my start frame is 0. And my end frame on that was 69. Now, I wish I could tell you there was just a quick, easy way to just render both sequences, but I'm going to render all of shot 1 first, and then I'll render shot 2 after that. I'm going to go ahead and set my camera to that one there, make sure I'm at HD 1080, and if all of that is correct, I should be able to close this, go ahead and save it, and I should be able to go to, finish the saving, there we go. I should be able to go to rendering, render, and then render sequence, and it will start rendering that sequence. I usually check my options box too. I don't know why I set it to camera 2. Did I set it to camera 2 in here? I had it set to camera 1, so I'm going to go ahead and set it to camera 2 there, right? And then render sequence and close. And what it will start doing is putting those images into my images folder. You'll see right there. This shows you the path of where it's going to put those images. Notice that if that path is at the wrong spot, if it's putting that in like your documents folder or something like that, that means you didn't set your project. And yet again, that's going to be probably the number one problem people have is not setting their project. So render sequence and close. If you're rendering with Redshift, a lot of those settings are similar. So I can leave the settings in my options box the same. But first, let's look at Redshift render view and remember, and I don't have any Redshift lighting in here, so the render looks bad. But this is our render preview, kind of. This is our interactive render, right? If we want to see what the final render looks like, let's go ahead and turn that off. It's this button right here, right? And this is our production render. And you'll see that it calculates everything and then does an actual single image render. So if I'd used Redshift lights and everything looked pretty here, I would be rendering out of Redshift. If I go to my render settings and change my render that I'm using to Redshift, a lot of this will change in the way that we render this out. Now, again, in Arnold, I generally like to render to EXRs. Actually, with anything, I like to render to EXRs. EXRs if you're going to spend that long rendering an image, EXRs contain more information that allow you to alter that image later, right? JPEGs you're not going to be able to do much color correction with a JPEG or with a PNG. So let's just do OpenEXR and leave it like that. By default, it is set to render animation. I'm not sure if it's set by default, but to render animation, you just check the animation tab, and it will then let you choose your start and end frame. I think it just carried over a lot of this information from the Arnold settings, and we got shot 1 there again, and it'll show you that what the shots are going to look like is shot 1.0000 through shot 1.0069. One more thing I want to check on here, it is depending on which one you're rendering with, we could speed up or slow down our render a little bit by changing our render settings. And so for Redshift, it's under basic. And what we're looking at right now is the production render, not the live render. And just changing this quality by default will speed up or slow it down. Redshift's pretty quick, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it on medium. We could also turn on denoising if you would like with Redshift, and that's going to, if there's like some speckling in the render, this will help like smooth that out. And you can decide to turn on motion blur if you would like. And so just to give you an example of what that might look like, here we go. This is a shot where he's running in there. Right? If I did a quick Redshift render of that, so let's go to Arnold really quick and look there. So there are some additional settings we can check on there. Arnold render viewer here, Arnold renderer. These numbers are going to help us dial in, speed up stuff. And I will say that just by default, there's a lot to this. So I'm not going to spend too much time going over that. But there is one of the things we can change. If our render is going really slow, if we go over to systems, you'll see right now, let me actually do this in Arnold. Right now, one of our renders is it's going pretty slow. It's not terribly slow, but one frame is taking about, so it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 seconds, right? Which isn't terrible, right? So I will show you that this is currently rendering with our CPU, right? If I click this button here, I can go to GPU, and the first render is going to take a while, because basically what is happening is Arnold is calculating all of the things it needs to get that first render, right? But once it's calculated, like loaded all of this stuff up into onto the graphics card, it's going to render it much, much faster. So you'll notice now if I just click onto this, my render took 1 second. That's a little better, right? But what you'll also notice is it's not as good a quality. We got some noise in that. So back in this section here, you will see that we have some of these values are grayed out now because they don't actually apply to GPU rendering. So we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to do adaptive sampling and enable it. And this number here is what's going to change your render time. Yeah. Actually, both of these numbers were a little bit, but this number and this number are going to be a big part of that. So I'm going to set mine to something like 10, right? And let it render, and you'll see that my render is faster, and still doesn't have that much noise in it. It doesn't have that much grain to it. So that's not bad at 10. Maybe if 7 seconds, if I feel like I can afford a little bit more, maybe I'll crank that up to like 13 or something, right? Now there's one more thing I want to show you that will help your render speed inside of Arnold. And that's down here at the bottom, imagers. And so I'm going to add an imager. And what I'm going to add is an optics denoiser optics. And I believe, well, seems to have messed something up there. There we go. So this is going to, let's say I turn this number down again to something ridiculously low, right? Um, our render goes faster, and what Arnold tries to do is blur out the noise. But what that means is it sometimes also blurs your textures a little bit, right? And so you'll see it like it renders it with the noise, but then it tries to clean it up by blurring the noise just a little bit. So you can play around with this, but I feel like maybe 10 with the denoiser, maybe maybe what I'm going for here on mine, right? Um, so I know that was a lot. What I would say is back and forth between it. Both Arnold and Redshift have a lot of the same tools, right? Like for example, under here, under our basic tab, under Redshift, that denoising that we just did in Arnold is right there under enable denoise, right? So all of these things exist in both of them, and they both, for the most part, render the same. You just have to figure out which buttons do what. Now, the only real difference is if you are rendering in Redshift, when you go to render, don't do render sequence, do batch render. And you can go to your options box. There's not really any options for that, so you just say batch render and close. So Redshift uses batch render, Arnold uses render sequence.